A sharp voice from behind cut through Zara's exhaustion. "Ma'am, you're blocking the aisle." She adjusted the baby bag, digging into her shoulder, and offered a faint smile. In her arms, her 9-month-old daughter, Mary, whimpered, her cheeks red and her tiny fists balled up. A full-blown tantrum was imminent. "Sorry," Zara murmured, wrestling her beat-up suitcase down the narrow corridor. It snagged an armrest, throwing her off balance. She clutched Mary tighter, her eyes scanning the seat numbers above. Row 19, 20, 21. Just a little further. Mary let out a piercing cry. Zara's heart pounded as she fumbled in her bag for a bottle, feeling the stares of other passengers on her back. Then she saw it, an empty window seat with no one next to it. She didn't bother to check her ticket. She just needed to sit down. She slid into the seat and quickly settled Mary on her lap, whispering soft reassurances. The baby's cries subsided into hiccups as Zara, with trembling hands, prepared her formula. The world around her blurred into a cacophony of noise and motion. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood there, dressed in a tailored white shirt and dark trousers that seemed out of place in the economy section. His cool gray eyes moved from the ticket in his hand to Zara and her child. Zara's stomach churned. "Oh," she said, her voice filled with panic. "I'm so sorry. I thought this was free. I'll move right now." She began to get up, juggling her daughter and her bag, which started Mary crying again. Zara's chest grew tight. The man simply raised a hand. "It's all right. Stay there. I'll take this seat." Without another word, he slid into the middle seat next to her. Zara stared at him, bewildered. "Are you sure?" He glanced at her, then at Mary, and gave a firm nod. I'm sure his calm presence was strangely grounding. "Thank you," she whispered. He settled into his seat with a quiet exhale. What Zara couldn't know was that this man was Daniel Hale, a tech CEO whose net worth was approaching $500 million. His face was a regular feature in business publications, his name synonymous with groundbreaking success. But business class had been full, and he'd taken the last available seat in economy to make a critical meeting in Chicago. He had prepared himself for inconvenience, perhaps even a fussy child nearby. He had not expected to find a woman in his seat, holding a baby who looked so much like his niece, or to feel a jolt when her tired, apologetic eyes met his. He had been about to ask her to move, but then he saw it, a faint, fading bruise on her cheek, poorly concealed by makeup. He noticed the protective way she held her child like a shield, the tremor in her hands, the fear hiding behind her apology. In that moment, he saw his sister, Chloe, her eyes haunted as she held her own child, fleeing from a life of pain. Daniel hadn't been able to save her in time. He looked back at Zara and sat down without hesitation. Zara slowly released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Mary, now nursing quietly, snuggled deeper into her arms. Zara arranged a blanket over her and then risked a glance at the man beside her. Most people would have caused a scene or demanded their seat. "I really appreciate this," she said softly. "It's been a very long day." He turned his unreadable gaze toward her. "I can only imagine." A comfortable silence settled between them as Mary drifted to sleep, her tiny fist clutching Zara's shirt. Zara leaned her head back, a wave of relief washing over her as the plane began to taxi. Daniel leaned back as well, closing his eyes for a moment. Two strangers, two separate lives, now connected by a simple seating mix-up and an unspoken understanding. Neither of them knew that this flight was about to change both of their destinies. The contrast between them was stark. Zara, in her worn jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt faintly stained with spit up, had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of months without proper rest. She shifted constantly, adjusting her hold on Mary, who stirred in her lap. Every small noise from the baby sent a flash of anxiety across Zara's face, as though she feared the entire cabin would erupt in annoyance at the first whimper. Beside her sat Daniel, composed and cool in his expensive clothes. The watch on his wrist was likely worth more than her rent for several months. Yet he seemed preoccupied, his jaw tense as he stared ahead, his mind clearly on the multi-billion-dollar deal waiting for him in Chicago. But for some reason, focusing on that felt harder than focusing on the woman beside him. He stole a sideways glance. She was trying to be small, to be invisible. He knew that kind of fear, the kind that teaches you to disappear in plain sight. Then Mary began to wail, a sharp, sudden cry that filled the cabin. A few passengers groaned audibly. A man across the aisle muttered, "Oh, here we go." Color flooded Zara's cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, digging frantically through her bag. She pulled out a bottle, but her hands were shaking so badly that the cap slipped from her fingers and rolled under the seat. She bent down, trying to retrieve it while holding Mary, whose cries only intensified. Without a word, Daniel leaned over, found the cap, and handed it to her. "Do you need some warm water?" he asked calmly. Zara looked at him, surprised. "I usually ask the flight attendant, but they're all busy at the front. I can wait." Daniel had already pressed the call button. When an attendant arrived, he spoke before Zara could. "Could we trouble you for some warm water for a baby's bottle?" The attendant smiled kindly at Zara and returned a moment later with a cup of hot water. Daniel carefully mixed it into the bottle, tested the temperature on his wrist, tightened the cap, and gave it a gentle shake. He handed the prepared bottle to Zara just as Mary's face was turning crimson from crying so hard. "Here," he said. Zara took it reverently with both hands and offered it to her daughter. Mary latched on immediately, and within seconds, her cries ceased as her small body relaxed against her mother. Zara looked at Daniel, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." "Really?" He gave a small, hesitant smile, but remained silent. From a few rows behind them, a woman leaned to her husband. "You don't see many men do that," she whispered. Mary let out a soft sigh, and one of her tiny hands reached out, her fingers wrapping around Daniel's index finger. He stared down at the small fist, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. The simple, trusting gesture completely disarmed him. Zara watched the interaction in quiet amazement. She hadn't expected help or kindness, and certainly not from a stranger who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. She cleared her throat. "Most people just get annoyed." Daniel finally turned to look at her fully. "She's a baby," he said, his tone simple. "She has as much right to be here as anyone else." Zara held his gaze, and in that long moment, an invisible wall between their two worlds began to crack. In the recycled air of the crowded cabin, Daniel Hale had made a small choice, but to Zara, it felt monumental. Someone had chosen kindness, not for show or out of duty, but because he saw her and decided not to look away. As Mary fell into a peaceful slumber, her fingers still curled around his, Zara found herself breathing a little easier. Perhaps not all strangers were a threat, and perhaps kindness could be found in the most unlikely of places. With Mary finally asleep, her tiny head resting on Zara's chest, Zara allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. Beside her, Daniel sat with his hands folded, his gaze lost in the clouds outside the window. The turmoil inside him had quieted, though he wasn't sure why. "Thank you again," Zara murmured, careful not to wake her daughter. Most people would just roll their eyes. Daniel turned to her. "I did on the inside," he admitted with a wry, fleeting smirk. Zara let out a small laugh, a sound that surprised her. "Well, a half-second is still a new record." After a pause, Daniel asked, "Where are you headed?" "Chicago," she answered. "I'm staying with my cousin while I get my feet under me." He sensed there was more to her story. "A fresh start." She nodded, stroking Mary's soft hair. "I hope so." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I used to teach preschool. I loved the noise, the laughter, everything about it. Then I got married. Too young. I thought I knew what love was." She looked away, her voice lowering. "It wasn't love. It was control. He monitored my calls, my texts, my clothes, who I talked to. I didn't even recognize myself anymore." Daniel listened without interrupting. "I stayed, even when it got bad. I thought I was supposed to. But then Mary was born." She gazed down at her sleeping child. "I couldn't let her grow up thinking that was normal. So one night, I just packed a bag and left. No plan, just us." Daniel's voice was low and steady. That's incredibly brave. It doesn't feel brave, Zara confessed. I'm still terrified. Every time a man looks at me for too long, I wonder if he's judging me. Or worse, if my ex sent him. I understand that feeling, Daniel said quietly. Zara turned to him, surprised. You do? He paused, then nodded. My fiancée died. A quel accident. She was on her way to meet me to celebrate a promotion I'd just gotten. After she was gone, I just stopped feeling. Business was logical. Emotions weren't. Zara's expression softened as she saw the deep-seated pain behind his composure. Daniel reached into the seat pocket, pulling out a small notepad and a pen. He began to fold a piece of paper with practiced ease. What are you doing? Zara asked. It's something my sister taught me. It helped with her anxiety. A few minutes later, he handed her a perfectly folded paper star, placing it gently beside Mary's hand. For her, he said. For better days, a lump formed in Zara's throat. No one's ever made anything for her before. There's a first time for everything, he replied. She offered him a genuine, grateful smile. As the cabin lights dimmed, Zara's body finally surrendered to exhaustion. She started to slump, and Daniel noticed. You can rest. I'll watch over her, Zara hesitated. Are you sure? He nodded. I promise. She was asleep within minutes. Her head tilted slightly toward him, Mary still nestled in her arms. Daniel watched them for a long time. Then he carefully took the airline blanket and draped it over them both, tucking it in around Mary. He leaned back, his eyes resting on the little paper star. He felt something shifting inside of him, too. Hours later, when Zara awoke to the dim cabin lights, the first thing she saw was the blanket, then the star, and finally Daniel, still awake and watching over them. Thank you, she whispered, for not judging me. Daniel met her gaze, his own steady. Never. It was somewhere over Nebraska when Zara jerked awake, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. No, she pleaded, her eyes still shut. Please, don't take her. Don't. Her hand shot out, grasping at the air. Daniel was instantly alert. The cabin was dark and quiet, but Zara was trembling, clutching Mary protectively as tears streamed down her face. Hey, Daniel said gently, pulling a tissue from the seat pocket and offering it to her. It's okay. You're safe. Zara's eyes fluttered open, fear still clouding her features. She took the tissue with a shaky hand and turned away to wipe her tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, she trailed off, taking a long, shuddering breath. I was dreaming about him. Daniel remained quiet, giving her the space she needed. She looked down at Mary, who slept on, one tiny fist tucked under her chin. In the dream, Zara said, her voice low, he found us. He was trying to take her from me, and I couldn't move or scream. You're safe now, Daniel repeated softly. He's not here, and you aren't alone. Zara looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed but clear, filled with a raw honesty. I left with nothing, she said. No real plan, no money, just a diaper bag and Mary. I knew if I stayed any longer, I wouldn't make it. And if I didn't survive, she would never get a chance at a better life. Daniel listened intently. I stayed in a shelter for a few nights. Then a friend of my cousin's let us sleep on their couch. Now we're going to Laura's. She said we can stay as long as we need. Zara hesitated. But I can't be a burden forever. I want to work, to teach again. More than anything, I just want Mary to grow up laughing. Not flinching, she looked Daniel straight in the eye, her voice firm. I don't need to be saved. I just need a place where she can be happy. Daniel felt a tightness in his throat. He had met countless women in his life, business partners, socialites, charity board members, but none had ever been so unfiltered, so brutally courageous. I had a sister, he said quietly. Chloe. She was a lot like you. Kind, resilient, too proud to ask for help. Her boyfriend was abusive. She didn't tell anyone until it was too late. Zara's breath hitched. Daniel continued, his voice distant. I tried to help. Offered her money, a safe place, anything. She refused. Said she had to do it on her own terms. Then one night, he came home drunk. She never got out. Zara covered her mouth. I'm so sorry. He gave a single, sharp nod, his eyes fixed ahead. I couldn't save her, and I couldn't save the woman I loved. Since then, It's just been about getting by. They sat in the heavy silence that followed, a shared understanding of pain passing between them. Zara reached into her diaper bag and pulled out the same notepad Daniel had used. She tore off a sheet and began to fold it with careful, deliberate movements. A few moments later, she held out a tiny paper star, just like the one he'd made for Mary. "For you," she said. "To remember that you did help someone today." Daniel took the star. It was smaller than his, a little imperfect, but made with immense care. He ran his thumb over a fold, as if to make sure it was real. "No one's given me anything like this in years," he whispered. Zara leaned back, feeling exhausted but somehow lighter. Mary sighed in her sleep, and both adults managed a faint smile. Daniel carefully tucked the origami star into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. For a brief moment, the cabin noise faded, and the weight of their past lifted just enough for something new, trust, and maybe something more, to begin to grow. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Chicago," the intercom announced. "Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Zara gently repositioned Mary, who remained asleep, her tiny fingers clutching Zara's sweater. She gazed out the window as the city lights began to sparkle below. Beside her, Daniel was silent. He was watching her, studying the quiet, protective way she held her daughter. He wanted to say so much, but no words felt right. The cabin stirred around them as people prepared for landing, but in their small row, there was only a profound, unspoken emotional weight. Zara reached for another piece of paper from the notepad and folded it with steady hands. When she was done, she placed a small paper star on Daniel's tray table. "For your sister," she said softly. Daniel stared at it, then lifted it gently, nodding once, unable to trust his voice. When the plane touched down, they remained quiet. As the seatbelt sign pinged off, people began to move. Zara stayed seated, carefully strapping Mary into a baby carrier. Daniel stood and waited, offering a hand with her diaper bag. She accepted, and their fingers brushed for a fleeting, electric moment. Out in the bustling terminal, the crowd began to thin. Zara turned to Daniel one last time. "Thank you," she said, "for being kind when you had no reason to be." Daniel stepped closer. "Could I get your number? Or give you mine?" Zara paused. For a second, she wanted to say yes, to hold on to this unexpected connection. But the old fear returned, the fear of being known, of being vulnerable, of being found. "I can't," she whispered. "You're a good person, but we're from different worlds." Daniel's brow furrowed. "That doesn't matter." "It does," she insisted. "You live in boardrooms. I live in borrowed rooms. I can't risk needing someone again." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he stepped back. Zara turned and walked away, Mary secure against her chest, her shoulders squared and her head high. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the terminal as passengers flowed around him like water around a stone. He looked down at the paper star in his hand, slightly crushed from his grip. He watched until she disappeared from sight. Then a memory surfaced. A charity gala his company sponsored months ago. He'd done a PR visit to a women's shelter they funded. He remembered the common room, the handshakes, and then he saw her in his mind's eye, Zara, sitting with a counselor, a baby on her lap, looking lost, just as she had on the plane. "I've seen her before," he whispered to himself, "and I'm not losing her again." He slipped the star into his pocket and walked purposefully toward the exit. He didn't know how, but he would find her. Not because she needed a savior, but because for the first time in years, he needed someone too. Back in his office, Daniel sat behind a polished desk, the city lights glittering behind him. His assistant placed the final contract on the table. "Just need your signature." He signed it. Billions of dollars secured, shareholders ecstatic. But his mind was miles away. That evening, long after the office had emptied, Daniel dialed a number he knew by heart. "Tom," he said when the call connected. "Daniel," the voice on the other end replied, surprised. "What can I do for you?" "I need a favor. Are you still at O'Hare?" "Yeah, night shift." "What is it?" There was a woman, black, mid-20s, with a baby about 9 months old. She was on flight 382 to Chicago with me 2 nights ago. Can you check the manifest? Tom let out a low whistle. That's not exactly protocol, man. I know, Daniel said. But it's important. Please, after a tense pause, Tom agreed. Give me a few. Daniel paced his office, his hand in his pocket, fingering the folded paper star. 20 minutes later, his phone rang. Name's Zara Kelly. Traveling with an infant, Mary Kelly. Ticket was bought through a women's outreach program. Destination is listed as Chestnut Hill, Illinois. That's all I've got. Daniel closed his eyes in relief. That's everything. Thank you. The next day, without telling a soul, he left the city. He didn't take a driver or an SUV. He rented an ordinary sedan, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, and drove 3 hours west. On the passenger seat sat a single origami star, slightly larger than the others, carefully folded from cardstock and inscribed with delicate handwriting. For Mary. Chestnut Hill was a quiet town. Daniel easily found the local park, a humble space with a few benches and a playground. And there she was. Zara sat on the grass, laughing as Mary toddled in front of her, trying to catch falling leaves. The sight of them made Daniel's heart pound with uncertainty. What if she thought he was stalking her? What if he made her feel cornered? He almost turned to leave, but a red-haired woman approached him, her arms crossed and her eyes sharp. You're not from around here, she stated bluntly. Daniel nodded. I'm looking for someone. Zara, the woman's eyebrows raised. You're Daniel? Yes. Her gaze softened from suspicious to curious. I'm Laura. Her cousin Daniel swallowed hard. Is she? Okay. She's getting there, Laura replied. You're the man from the plane? I am. Laura tilted her head. You drove all this way just to see her? Daniel nodded, holding out the star he'd made. Laura took it, read the inscription, and glanced back at the park. He drove for hours to find you, she murmured to herself, then looked back at Daniel. Maybe you are different. She walked across the grass toward Zara, who had just scooped Mary into her arms. As they spoke, Zara turned her head. Her eyes met his across the field. She didn't move, but she didn't look away. The bell on the door of the corner market jingled as Zara entered, a shopping list in one hand and Mary balanced on her hip. She was reaching for strawberries when she saw him standing in the produce aisle. Daniel. He looked as surprised as she felt, though there was a hint of hope in his eyes. Zara, he said softly. She froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. What are you doing here? I was just driving through, he said, the lies sounding weak even to him. Her eyes narrowed. You followed me. I found you, he corrected gently, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. And I didn't come to rescue you, Zara. I came because I missed you. Her grip on Mary tightened. The baby babbled and reached a tiny hand toward Daniel. Zara was torn. Part of her wanted to run, but another, quieter part of her was tired of running. Why would someone like you miss someone like me? Daniel's gaze was steady. Because you made me feel again. Because you're strong and you're real. And because your daughter smiled at me like she trusted me before I even knew how to trust myself. Zara's expression softened. After a long moment, she gave a single nod. Okay, walk me home. From that day forward, they began to see each other. Quietly, naturally. They took walks through the neighborhood and had coffee on park benches while Mary played nearby, folding tiny paper stars together. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like a possibility instead of countdown. But the peace was short-lived. One evening, Zara got a text from an unknown number. It was an old photo of Mary. The next message read, Asterisk, you can't keep her from me forever. I'm coming. James asterisk, her hands trembled as she showed the phone to Daniel. His jaw tightened. Do you want to call the police? He hasn't technically done anything, she said bitterly. It's just a threat. But I know him. He'll do it. Daniel immediately took out his phone. I know a lawyer, one of the best. We'll make sure he never comes near her again. Zara hesitated. I don't want to owe you anything. You won't, he said firmly. This isn't a favor. It's what you and Mary deserve. That night, she sat on the porch with Laura, watching Mary sleep. He wants to help, Zara whispered. But what if I start needing him too much? What if he leaves, just like all the others? Laura sipped her tea. He's not like James. You know that. Let him in. The first person you need to trust is yourself. The next day, at the park, Mary toddled right into Daniel's legs and held up her arms. He instinctively scooped her up, making a funny face that sent her into a fit of giggles. Watching them, Zara felt a sense of ease and joy she hadn't known was possible. She reached out and took Daniel's hand. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she said quietly. Daniel looked down at her. "Neither did I." Zara started working part-time at a local community center, a job Laura had helped her find. It wasn't much, but it gave her a sense of purpose. The center was a refuge for women like her, and she found solace in helping others rebuild their lives. Unbeknownst to her, the center had recently received a large, anonymous donation, enough to expand its programs. The donor was Daniel, who had insisted his name be kept private. He wanted her to find her own strength, not to be defined by his wealth. One sunny afternoon, the center held a Freedom Day picnic to celebrate new beginnings. Zara, Laura, and other local families gathered in the garden. Paper stars hung from the tree branches. Zara was helping Mary fold a blue star when the little girl toddled away, running straight to Daniel. He knelt just in time to catch her as her little arms wrapped around his neck. She pressed the star against his chest. "Papa," she said clearly. Zara froze, her heart aching with emotion. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes serious. "I don't want to replace her father," he said slowly. "But I would like to be." Zara's eyes filled with tears. She swallowed and whispered, "I know." It was a quiet moment that changed everything. But peace is often tested. James, her ex-husband, began sending legal threats, complete with pictures of court documents demanding custody of Mary. This time, Zara didn't crumble. She brought the papers straight to Daniel. "He's serious," she said. "So are we," Daniel replied. He took her to a top family law office, one he secretly funded through a legal aid initiative, but he waited outside while she met with the lawyers. This had to be her fight. With the center's support, Zara's legal team compiled a mountain of evidence: medical records, witness testimonies, and threatening voicemails. The case they built was irrefutable. In the sterile, cold courtroom, James's arguments were weak and bitter. He tried to paint Zara as an unstable mother. But when Zara took the stand, she was not a victim. She was a survivor. "I was trapped because I was afraid," she said, her voice strong. "But I stand here today, not just as a mother, but as a woman fighting for my child's right to feel safe." From the back of the courtroom, Daniel watched, his eyes locked on her, filled with pride. When she stepped down, she passed a seat. "You were so brave," he whispered. The ruling was swift. James lost all parental rights and was served with a permanent restraining order. As security led him away, he looked at Zara one last time and saw only strength. He knew he had lost forever. Weeks later, in another Freedom Day celebration, Zara stood before the community, Mary in one arm and a microphone in the other. "For a long time," she began, "I believed love was something that caged you. But now I know that true love sets you free." As the crowd applauded, Daniel stepped forward with a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of origami stars. He lifted the largest one, a golden star on which 3 words were written: "For our future." He didn't kneel. He just looked at her. "I love you, Zara," he said. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're a fighter who still knows how to smile. I don't want to save you. I just want to be there for you." And for Mary, tears streamed down Zara's face as she nodded. "Then we'll stay," she whispered. Together, 1 year later, a golden sunset bathed a lake in warm light. Zara and Daniel, now husband and wife, walked hand in hand along the shore. Mary, now a happy toddler, skipped ahead, a paper star tied to a ribbon fluttering in the breeze behind her. The wrong seat on a plane had led to the right heart. It was a story of courage, of healing, and of a love that was finally real. Framed against the fading sun stood a new family, not perfect but whole.